Any time here, folks. Don't go away. Look at Mayer going after Spezza. Mayer's throwing the ball. He's got the helmet on. And now Chris Lee from the goalies. Oh, here come the goalies. I'm not sure they're running off much of this. Ray Emery is taking his time, taking it. That's the call here, folks. Buckle up. Because Emery, I don't think Marty Baron's anxious to get going here, but Ray Emery's got the right hand for it. He's just filled in Marty Baron. And Baron is down helpless, and right now Ray Emery could absolutely murder him. If Baron is smart, he'll stop throwing punches. Emery's trying to help him back up so he can bump him some more. Chris Phillips and Patrick Olenick at the other end of the ice. Oh, and Marty Baron just threw a punch at Ray Emery, and Ray Emery is saying, let's do it again. And now Andrew Peters is coming on Ray Emery, and Emery's trying to smile, and Peters better be careful. Oh, this is not right here, folks. This is not if somebody succumbed to the face of Ray Emery, but a couple of punches are going to be thrown. And Ray Emery, all he needs to do is hit 1-3.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. It is Kevin Olenick. Eating, drinking, and sleeping hockey as we continue here in the off season. You can follow Podcast Hockey on Facebook. You can like the Hockey Podcast or Podcast Hockey, on Twitter. You can follow me on myself, KEVOLE on Twitter, or the Podcast Hockey on Twitter. You can like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook as well. And of course, this podcast is also on Spreaker.com, KEVOLE, where agree or disagree the podcast is as well. And we've been going through a little bit of this. We're going through the off season here. We've spent some time focusing on some of the other teams. This is episode 3 of the Hockey Podcast. So we had a conversation about the off-season plan of the Vancouver Canucks. This week we're going to have an off-season conversation as well about the Calgary Flames. And we'll go through some of the teams here slowly and surely as we go on. But there is a team that has been falling a little bit under the radar. They are the former 2-time Stanley Cup champions, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who this year were eliminated in the second round by the eventual Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals. So let's talk about where they're at right now, as they are certainly, when you were thinking about favorites, we probably have the Tampa Bay Lightning would be up there. Some people will have the Washington Capitals, or some people with the signing of John Tavares. Has to be every time we almost say John Tavares' name. The Toronto Maple Leafs have planned a Stanley Cup parade, apparently. But where are the Pittsburgh Penguins in this march to the Eastern Conference? Are they still someone to be reckoned with? We are going to find that out with Mitch Milani from the Bottom Line View. How's it going, Mitch?
Going pretty well. But actually, just a few moments ago, it was pretty sad for hockey.
Yes, we do need to start with the news that just broke about an hour or so before we started this recording, and it's the passing away of Ray Emery. He apparently, reports are he drowned he was found drowning in Hamilton. Still some stories going out about what that is, but the condolences across the NHL have been poured out. A lot of people are not pulling something up here, as we're talking. Ray Emery is probably one of those guys that a lot of people remember for the fight that we started off with the fight that he had over that Buffalo Sabres with Marty Baron and Warren and Peters. But he also was a Cup finalist with the Ottawa Senators. He was a Cup champion with the the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013. He had a record 12-game winning streak to start the season in the NHL, and was a 2-time Masterton Trophy nominee as well. So I think Ray Emery is an interesting person in the NHL. What do you remember about Mr. Emery, Mitch?
Well, other than certainly being probably the toughest goalie to ever play the sport. He stuck out really as a good goalie in the playoffs as well, like you brought up. He's 21-17 in his career in the playoffs. Had that one run with Ottawa, I do remember. Philadelphia, I remember his days at the end in Philadelphia, just coming in late because I'm a Penguins fan, so of course I saw a lot of those games. And yeah, I think he's probably known as a Senator, though, for a lot of his career, and overall seemed like a really good guy. Obviously didn't know him, but a lot of the hockey world, the NHL world, is crushed by his loss, but
yeah,
sucks to see him go.
Yeah, so we do remember him as we're going through this, and he is going to be a guy that I think people are going to talk about. He had his rough patches for sure. We can't ignore that, but he was a guy that really persevered. And you mentioned, I think, certainly when we think of tough goalies, Billy Smith, Ron Hextall, Ray Emery will be up there as well. Some people may have some controversial opinions about him, but he was a guy that found a way to be in the NHL when it was tough for him to do that because, he wasn't, some people felt he wasn't a fit, but that Ottawa Senator team wasn't a team like the team a couple of years ago as well, but that Ottawa Senator team wasn't a team that a lot of teams believed in or people believed in. That team went through a number of questionable history. If we remember, it was not that long ago before that they had Dominic Hasek and were expected to dominate the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they did not. That was a team that no one really had a lot of belief in getting into the Cup final, and they did it rather convincingly. Actually, that year that they got to the Cup final. Of course, they were overmatched eventually by the Anaheim Ducks, but they did beat the Sabres in 5 games. And that was an underrated Ottawa Senators team, I think, when we look back. We don't remember that team as well as we do this team and what this current Ottawa Senators situation is. But that was a rather underrated Ottawa Senator team that Ray Emery led to the finals.
Yeah. 33 wins in that season, only 16 losses, 5 shutouts. So spoke to his importance to the team as well.
Yeah. And considering where they are for sure. So it's good that we start off talking a little bit about Ray Emery and where they are. And, of course, I don't think that a lot of people are thinking much about where the Ottawa Senators are going this year, but they do have some fond memories of Cup final appearance, and it's a very sad day for not only the Senators family, but I think the NHL family as well, the passing of Ray Emery. But let's move into the Pittsburgh Penguins, and let's look back here, Mitch, to 2 straight years of Stanley Cup championships. You, of course, supporting all the winners. If watch the bottom line view or
that's what it seems like, doesn't it, Kevin?
Yeah. Yes. Mitch is a winner. That's what we know. If you know anything about Mitch, he's a winner. But after all of that, we get a complete, really domination over the years over the Washington Capitals. Except this year, the Ovechkin eventually, finally climbs the ladder and defeats Crosby and the Penguins, and eventually becomes the Stanley Cup champions. So what was the difference this year from the Penguins from previous years? What did the Capitals have this year that the Penguins did not?
Interesting question. I think it's still a tough one to answer, but I think the first thing that has to be said is they took a different approach to the series. They took a different approach to the season, and they went with the long game, and they understood that if they were going to beat the Penguins, they first needed to get a little bit more defensive. I thought certainly their defense was really good throughout their run. They got some magical playing in net from Holtby, finally showed up in the playoffs, so that was huge for them. But I think it was just the mental game for them. It was just getting over the hump of that one series against Columbus in the first round where, myself included, a lot of people were picking against them to lose that series, and they were losing the series. They ended up coming back and making some crazy comebacks in that series, and then went to Pittsburgh. And I don't know if it was really physical talent, if it was the players themselves outmatching the Penguins, but it just seemed like they wanted it a little bit more than everybody else this season, and you saw it in their play. They were faster to the puck, their forecheck was harder, their defense was better, their goaltending was better, and I even think you got to give a nod to the coaching, and now of course, the head coach is now gone, but Ovechkin, definitely you need to give him a hand for the leadership job he did, because you saw it throughout the team. He was the true leader of that team, and that's been the one big question about Ovechkin over all these years is he a winner? Is he a guy that can get it done on the biggest stage? He finally proved that, and also is he a great leader? And he proved that through and through. And you know what it reminded me of, Kev? I believe I brought this up to you before, but it reminded me of Peyton Manning finally defeating Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game, and you knew it was just going to happen where if they get over that hurdle, the Capitals were going to win the Stanley Cup. And finally, they got over that hurdle of the Penguins, which the Penguins, I would say, maybe they were a little tired after 2 years of runs to the Stanley Cup, and that does happen. But I just didn't feel like the Penguins were the same team they were the last couple of years, and we're going to see if they can fix that as well. But the Capitals, they were the best team in hockey this year, and you got to give it to them.
Yeah, and, I think last year you look at that series between the Pens and the Capitals, and that they were down, the Capitals were down 3-1 and had to climb a huge hole to get back into it. And it was often that actually there was a hole. They were down 2-0, they were down 3-1. They never really established footing. This time they kept it even after 4 games. Pens win the first one, Caps win the second one. Caps win the game 3, and then the Pens win game 4. And I think that really, really helped a lot. And I do agree. I think Holtby and Ovechkin both were key factors in that as well. And I think it's good that Ovi's got his cup. I think it's good that Holtby has that recognition as well as being one of the top goalies. I don't know if I would put him as the best goalie in the NHL, but I would certainly think top certainly is up there. And I also think overall with the Caps too, I think the other thing is that team, the 2016-17 playoff team, that was a team that had the appearance of being loaded. They got Kevin Shattenkirk. They won the President's Trophy, which they didn't do this time. They just, in an NFL analogy, they were the Houston Texans. It was like the red letter series. They were going to do it. And they didn't have that chemistry and that confidence this time that I think that they showed this time in 2018, where I think they laid under the radar a little bit, and
it just seemed like they had better chemistry as a unit than the Pittsburgh Penguins did.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that Barry Trotz says is if he never really thought that Kevin Shattenkirk was a true fit. And you look back at how well the Blues played without Kevin Shattenkirk, how the Caps struggled with Kevin Shattenkirk, and how the Caps played without Kevin Shattenkirk. I think that you can certainly see that happened there as well. And you can look where the Rangers are with Kevin Shattenkirk. And
Kev, the thing about the Penguins and the Capitals, every single one of these series has been drawn out, tough, 1-goal games. An inch here, an inch there. You even forget the Penguins, the last game of this series, the 6th game, it was overtime.
Yep.
Kuhnackel goes down on basically a breakaway, hits the post. The puck goes back to the Capitals. They come down the other way and score.
Yep.
The difference between 1 or 2 inches of that going to Game 7 or it going to Washington to win the series. So, I mean, every single one of these series, whether it was Game 7, it's just these teams have been so close for so many years, and it finally went the Washington way where they were able to get a couple of those bounces and just get the edge. And I do truly believe that the Penguins were the toughest team that the Capitals did face this year.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I think mentally for sure. And I mean, we'll look on paper here in a moment as well. I think you look at the Knights. I think it's an interesting question where they're going to be. As well. I'm drawing and Tampa Bay. They were loaded, but you almost see Tampa Bay in that Washington realm that old Washington game where and it's going to be.
They're getting there. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah. Who? The Tampa Bay?
Tampa Bay. Nobody talks about that Tampa Bay's been around the cup or deep in the playoffs, but they haven't been able to pull out that victory yet. I feel like they're around that capital territory where it's becoming the next choking team.
Yep. And we'll get into this more. If they land Erik Karlsson and they don't win the Stanley Cup without, I think that there's going to be some serious questions having to be asked in Tampa Bay. But we'll as well, because that's a team. If you get Erik Karlsson, you're basically the NHL's version of the super team. And if you don't win a cup with that, there'll be a lot of questions. Speaking of questions, Matt Murray was a guy that a lot of people had a lot of are pretty high on. I still wouldn't necessarily say that they're not high on him, but they certainly the loss of Marc-Andre Fleury and what he did in Vegas, and the perception that maybe Murray didn't have his best series against Washington Capitals. Let's start in goal with the Penguins. Are you comfortable with Matt Murray going into this season, or would you like some goaltending improvement?
I'm comfortable with Matt Murray. The biggest thing for me with Matt Murray is his ability to stay on the ice. He gets injured for a goalie a lot, and whenever he gets injured, it seems to set him back in the net a little bit. Like, he'll be really good for stretches of time, and then he'll get injured, and then that will set him back to the point where he won't play well, and then he'll have to, just come back in the lineup instantly and be that starting goalie. While when there was Fleury, he could get injured, and then Fleury would come in, play lights out, and then when he was ready, Matt Murray could get back in the net and be confident and ready to go. And then that's when you would see the Matt Murray that we know. And of course, Matt Murray, I feel like everybody's been talking about over those cup wins. He won 2 Stanley Cups in his first 2 seasons. People were saying he was sort of overrated for the team he played on and stuff like that. I feel like he should be in that conversation as a top 10 goalie in the league. And I believe he still is. He didn't have his greatest playoffs or really season this year, but I think he's still a young guy. He's only 2 years older than me, so he's like 23, 24 years old now. And this guy, he's going to get better and better and better with more experience, and he was going to lose eventually in the playoffs. It was going to happen, so he just needs to get over that, and we'll see how he responds. But, of course, you're still going forward with Matt Murray as your starting goalie in mind for years to come.
Do you think that it would be beneficial for the Pens to get a veteran backup?
It depends who. I don't want to get a veteran backup if he's no good. The beauty about Fleury was he was not only a veteran backup who was a great character in the locker room, but he was also very good. Of course, you saw what he did with the Gold Knights. But if you're just going to get a veteran, like any veteran, like they tried to do this past season, that didn't really work out at the beginning of the year, and really the younger guys outplayed him. So if they're going to have a younger guy come in here, I think it's one or two things, Kev. I think the biggest thing is you need competition. It's like the quarterback position in the NFL, It's like you need a good guy behind your starter to push that guy to play well, and no matter who it is, it's just a little bit of competition. So Fleury pushed Murray to play better, Murray pushed Fleury to play better, and that's what you want at the goaltender position. I don't think it's necessarily you want that veteran because if he's not good enough to take the spot of Murray, he's just going to be sitting back there and Murray's going to be confident in his starting job. But if he's a veteran that's good, then it's going to push Murray to play better because the Penguins are a win-now team and they're going to start their best goalie no matter what their age is.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think that's when a lot of people are talking about veteran backup goaltenders. That's what you said there. I think is important to know. If the young guy is going to push, I think a lot of teams would rather go that way than bringing in a vet for the sake of bringing in a veteran, and especially if you're in a bit of an arms race, which I could see. You could argue right now that the Eastern Conference has a bit of a potential to have an arms race. You may need that salary for something a little bit later, more of a weapon that you may need later on in the year when you get into that point where trade deadline or at some point where you need to get that forward or that defenseman that may be the difference maker. So I do see your point about the veteran backup goaltender.
And Kevol, I feel like the Eastern Conference has been the same arms race for the past 4 or so years between the same teams.
Yes.
So Penguins, Lightning, Capitals, they've been at the front of the arms race. And now I guess you could throw the good old Toronto Maple Leafs in there.
Oh, we'll get there. We will get there. You know, I do want to bring up something that the Leaf fans are bringing up. And when we talk about the defense of the Pittsburgh Penguins, their argument has been, because the signing of John Tavares, God bless his name, with that signing, they have a strong forward core, but the argument against is, they have a weak defense. But their argument has been, well, the Pens didn't have a great defense for 2 years, and they still won a Stanley Cup. But I look at this defense. Chris Letang, okay, you can go one way or the other. Olenick, you probably will agree, needs to be a bit better, but he's still got an upside.
I thought last year he played way better than the year before. Yeah.
Justin Schultz is a guy I think almost could argue is relearning the position of defense after his time at Edmonton.
Well, they don't really teach you in Edmonton.
No, they don't. There's no defense in Edmonton. Brian Dumoulin is a guy that's a quiet 4.1. He's not. Brian
Dumoulin, it was the best defenseman on this team last year.
Okay, all right. And you got Chad Ruhwedel as well at 650, and Matt Hunwick.
Yep.
And of course, the controversial signing of Jack Johnson. So where are you, first of all, with the 6 returning, how are you feeling about that? And what do you feel Jack Johnson adds?
Okay, so Chris Letang, I think the biggest thing is how he plays. Last year, he was on and off. He had stretches of brilliant play, like he's one of the top 5 defensemen in the league, and then he had stretches of play where he's the worst defenseman that's on the ice. So it's just a matter of, is he going to come back? Because he had that injury, so obviously it usually takes about a year to get back to full form. Hopefully Chris Letang, he's had a lot of injuries in his career, can come back to be that Chris Letang we saw against the Sharks a couple years ago in the Stanley Cup Finals, because that was prime Chris Letang. But if we get that guy, then this puts this defense over the top, because he can just eat up all those minutes. He plays penalty kill, power play. He's one of your best offensive players as well as one of your best defensive players. So Chris Letang is like the Erik Karlsson, Drew Doughty. If he's on, then this defense is taken to the next level. But besides that, you have Brian Dumoulin, who typically plays with Chris Letang. I think he's quietly one of the better defensive defensemen in the league. He's not going to really score a lot, but he's big. He also can skate very well, and he's really, really good penalty killer, really, really good checker, and he's been huge for the Penguins in winning those Stanley Cups facing the top lines. So that's basically your top pairing, and then you also have Mata and Schultz coming in, usually maybe the second pairing, third pairing, it depends. They throw different guys together, but usually Letang and Dumoulin are together. Mata played a lot better to me last year. He looked a little bit quicker, and my thing with Mata has always been his foot speed. He's not really the fastest guy, but he is very intelligent on the ice. He can move the puck very well. He can shoot. He's more of an offensive guy to me, but he's also smart in his own end. I think he's still growing. He's the same age as Matt Murray. I don't know if he's going to hit his prime soon, but he's been a guy that since he's been 19, he's been on this team. And he's shown improvement in areas of his game, especially defensively as of late. So that's nice to see. Justin Schultz, he was amazing. When Chris Letang was out, you were like, who the heck is this Justin Schultz guy? He was lighting the league on fire. He was in the Norris conversation, which is why I nicknamed him Norris. Justin Schultz didn't play as well last year for whatever reason, but still has a cannon of a shot from the point. Very good skater. I think he was dealing with some injuries, but as a second pairing guy, I am confident in him. And then you throw in Jack Johnson into the fold. Of course, you also brought up Chad Ruhwedel, who I thought was impressive in his time just filling in, because they didn't really see him as the 6th defenseman last year. They had Matt Hunwick playing that position early in the season, and Chad Ruhwedel just outplayed him. Now, Chad Ruhwedel isn't going to light the world on fire for you. He's not going to show up really, but he's not going to make any mistakes, and he's going to do his role very soundly. He's a sixth defenseman that you want. Jack Johnson, what I think he brings, I'm a fan of the Jack Johnson signing. Actually, it says right now his number's 73. I don't know if that's correct or not, but Jack Johnson, big guy. I think he's going to bring grit to the team. He's going to bring experience. He's going to bring a bit of foot speed, I think, just moving the puck up the ice. And I think he's nice to have as a bottom pairing defenseman, a guy that's been there, done that. He has versatility to his game. He has size. And I think that's the biggest thing. He has size. He'll be the heaviest defenseman on the team. He'll bring a bit of hitting, a bit of edge. So I think that's what I like of Jack Johnson's game, is just that edge to his game, as well as the ability to kind of go up in the rush, but also be a stay-at-home defenseman at the same time.
Now, this is a 5-year contract for a 31-year-old. Are you okay with that? Because out here,
I hate NHL contracts, period. So I just try and get through it. But I feel like the salary itself is good.
Okay.
Like the salary itself per year is not the problem. It's just the length of the contract, and I guess we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, because I mean, out here in Vancouver, of course, with Jay Beagle, it's why are you signing so long?
And Louis Eriksson.
And, yeah, you know, a lot of those guys. So and that was one of the controversies, is you're signing a 31-year-old to a 5-year contract. And
I feel like Jack Johnson is one of those players where if you're one of those hockey fans that's a big statistics guy and you look at all the reports and stuff like that, you're not going to like Jack Johnson very much. But if you know hockey in the playoff times and what you need in a player to play in the playoffs, you want a player like Jack Johnson as your fifth defenseman, because he's going to do those things that you need to get done. He's just that type of defenseman that you might not be the biggest fan of his playing style, but I think he's a winner, and I think he adds that to the lineup.
Okay. So in comparison to, let's start with your own division with Washington and Columbus.
Yeah.
Washington and Columbus are the key contenders. Jersey, maybe
best division in hockey, Kevel.
I may make an argument for the Central Division in a lot of ways, but I think when you got Nashville, I mean, certainly I would say it's in the top two. I'll fairly say
you have the 3 past Stanley Cup winners, but that's okay.
That's true, but you've got a Winnipeg, Nashville. You got it really comes down with what you compare Columbus and Dallas to, because I think that they're both in that same. They could go one way or the other. But in terms of defense, where would you put Pittsburgh in terms of where they are in the division? Probably
behind the Blue Jackets.
Okay.
I think they are ahead of the Capitals, actually.
Okay. So second.
Yeah. I would say second. Flyers still need to work on their defense a little bit, and the other teams I'm not really worried about.
Okay.
To be honest.
Okay. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit of where you see everyone else as well. In comparison, though, to the Eastern Conference, and of course the parade that is being planned on Young and Bloor in Toronto, can we compare those compared to Toronto and maybe Tampa Bay? Where do you see Pittsburgh in that light?
In terms of where they are on the contender list?
In terms of their defense specifically, because I think that...
Oh, ahead of the Maple Leafs?
Well, I would argue they're better than the Leafs, but would you...
Oh, they are far better than the Leafs. I went to multiple Leafs games live last year, being in Toronto at Ryerson. The Leafs had the worst defense of any playoff team, and it was not even close. It was not even a debate. They could not clear the puck. The biggest issue with the Maple Leafs was not their forwards, was not that their forwards weren't scoring, was not that their forwards couldn't get opportunities to score. It was that the Maple Leafs took so much time in their own zone. It was absolutely ridiculous. They couldn't get up the ice. They couldn't transition up the ice. They couldn't break their own zone and that's why there was so much reliance on their goaltending. Like if you talk to any Leafs fan, that was the biggest thing. It was their goaltending because they would give up so many shots. I believe they were like third or second most shots given up in the entire league. And for a playoff team to give up that many shots, that's not very good. And I don't know, they had probably, in my opinion, one, maybe two good defensemen last year. And just when Ron Hainsey is playing on your top unit, that's not anything that's good. I'm just going to say that.
That's fair, although he played some significant minutes in the Penguins Cup run.
He did, but he was not a first-pairing defenseman.
Fair enough, and that's going to be interesting there. Let's go to the forwards, and before we look at the overall picture of the forwards of the Penguins, I want to talk a little bit about a guy that I'm going to say it. I feel like we are starting to underrate or undervalue Sidney Crosby.
How could you underrate Sidney Crosby, Kevin?
Hear me out. This is a guy that went through went pretty much back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, an Olympic gold medal, a world championship, World Cup champion, whatever that circus was. He led and won.
And he won the scoring title.
And this is a guy that I don't think we understand this accomplishment or recognize this accomplishment for what it was. This is a long period of hockey. It's a bit different now because we're playing pretty much hockey is now becoming a 10-month-a-year season as opposed to an 8-month-a-year season. And this is a guy that didn't get into the MVP conversation this year. This is a guy that still, I think that people have assumed that Mr. McDavid has passed him. I think that you can make the argument that Crosby is still the best player in the game. It's almost like I don't think we have given Crosby the credit for what he has done that I think he has necessarily deserved. I think we've almost taken it for granted. Because it's not the numbers of dominant scoring. It's not LeBron James in the NBA where he's scoring 3 or 4 points a game. He's had to develop a really strong two-way game, not be super offensive like a guy like Connor McDavid is. Is starting now. And I feel like we're starting to underrate the impact that Crosby has overall on this game. Because I think you could make the argument that he should have been in the MVP conversation a lot better than he was. And I think it was because he was part of a better team. And yeah, overall, I just don't think we gave him the recognition that he deserved for this run. It's an impressive run when you look at it.
Yeah, Kev, it's tough to really say that Sidney Crosby's overrated, or underrated, sorry. But I mean, I think it's what you said. I think it's the underrated comes from the fact that, think about it, this guy was basically labeled the next Gretzky, and he was 18 years old or 17 or whatever it was, getting drafted, and immediately he goes out in his first season, scores 100 points. And then he comes out and he misses the playoffs 1 year in his NHL career. And then he goes back-to-back to the Cup, loses 1 year to the Red Wings, wins another one to the Red Wings. The 1 year where going 27 points in 20 games, 31 points in 24 games in 07-08 in the playoffs. This year, I thought was probably his best playoffs he's had since 09. He was unbelievable, Kev. And I know that during the regular season, I understand what you mean about the hard conversation. It's like the Tom Brady, Michael Jordan thing now, I think, where it's like he's good, like we don't really need to give him even though Tom Brady just got an MVP, like that was almost because nobody else could win the award. So it was like, okay, Tom, you can take the award. But like the whole Michael Jordan thing was like, oh, he's so good he doesn't need the MVP anymore. Like Crosby is like, we know what Crosby does. We know he's great. You don't really need to give him the MVP. And for some reason, I'm not really sure, a lot of Pittsburgh fans, felt like Phil Kessel was the best Penguin this year, although he severely dropped off during the playoffs. It's always Crosby because Crosby always takes the most attention. He always plays with the worst players on his lines. He always is the leader. He is always the captain. And he's always not only the best in the offensive side of the puck, whether that's scoring or passing the puck, or that's possession time, or it's also the fact that he's great on his own end, and he never really misses an assignment. He never really makes a bad play in his own end. But he had 21 points in 12 games in the playoffs. He was the leader in the playoffs in points, along with his line mate Jake Gensel, until the middle of the Stanley Cup final, which is like ridiculous. So, yeah, I know people may say that McDavid passed him, and I love McDavid. I think McDavid is an extremely great offensive talent, but until I see him lead a team to the playoffs and to the promised land, I can't say that McDavid has passed Crosby because I still question his defensive side of the puck, and I still question his leadership ability as a player. And Crosby's consistency to take no matter who's on his line, no matter who's on his team, to that place, even with injuries along the way, that's pretty outstanding. So I have to still say that Crosby's the most complete, best overall player until I see McDavid do that. And he's going to pick up these trophies and awards along the way, and it is what it is. But if it depends how the way you look at hockey. If you are all about the stats, then maybe you be leaning towards McDavid. If you're more about what they do for the team, then you're probably on Crosby's side.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it does depend, but I do think it's important to recognize what the accomplishment. Two consecutive gold medals, World Championship in Prague, triple Gold Club, captained the Gold World Cup of Hockey, won the MVP of that. He played a lot of hockey too, and that's the big point as well. Is a lot. He's played a lot too, and I think that accomplishment in and of itself, I think, should be recognized as something well done. But there is you can argue if Crosby's underrated. Maybe the wrong word is not underrated or undervalued or however you can maybe. But a guy that absolutely is, I think, in terms of his impact on the game, he didn't even make the top 100.
Oh, here we go.
Is Malkin. And so let's talk about where you see Malkin right now and the impact he has in terms of.
I think he's the second greatest Russian player ever.
Behind
Ovechkin.
Okay, fair.
I don't really know what needs to be said. When I saw that he wasn't on the top 100, that's one of the most ridiculous things. He's won let's see his awards here, Kevel. He's won the Art Ross twice. He has 3 Stanley Cups. He has a Conn Smythe trophy. He has a Ted Lindsay trophy award. Multiple time All-Star. International MVP, World Championship Best Forward, World Championship All-Star Team. Evgeny Malkin is just a subject of where he's played. Because of the fact that he's played under Crosby as the second line center, although in stretches, he's been the better player in stretches. And the thing about Malkin to me, is to not have him in the top 100, because at moments in games, Evgeny Malkin is the most dominant player in the NHL in a given year. You'll see games where Evgeny Malkin is absolutely unstoppable. Like, he'll just take the ice and he'll score 2 goals, and he's skating, and at his size, he's so tough to stop. 6'3", a center, left-handed center. Like, how hard is that to find? And then you go out there and you just dominate with his skill at that size. And I don't know, he's been clutch in the playoffs. I don't really get what it is about people that don't really see the Malkin thing, but I believe, I don't know, I may be wrong here, But I feel like he, over the past 10 years, he has the most points in one playoffs that anybody has ever had in the past 10 years.
We'll have to look that up as we're talking.
Which was 2009. He had 36 points. Just a season ago, when they won the Cup, he had 28 points. He's had over 100 points 3 times. He had 98 this past year. I don't know what to say. Evgeny Malkin's a beast. He should be treated as one of the greatest players to ever play the game, and certainly one of the best offensive players to play the game. That's for sure.
If he played in a Canadian market in Toronto, this guy would be recognized. He would be put. There would be conversations about Hall of Fame with him for sure.
He's easily Hall of Famer.
Well, yeah.
If he's not in the Hall of Fame, that's
a travesty. That will be an absolute travesty if he's not in the Hall of Fame. I will give you that.
But like you have to say, since they won, or since they went to their first cup in like 07, 08, he's been one of the top 3 players in the NHL.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that. I mean, yes, it depends on where you put everybody, but certainly I think right now he's certainly top 5, and I think he hasn't been lower than 5.
Exactly.
I mean, to me right now,
how many times, Kev, do we see these guys enter and leave the conversation within a year or two? But Malkin has stayed there.
Yeah. To me right now, I'm looking at the top 5. And I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Is Crosby, McDavid, Malkin, Carlson, Doughty. I think would be my top 5 off the top of my head.
Sure.
You can argue either. You can add some other people and agree or disagree with that, I guess. But it's hard not to have. Don't recall any time that I would not have Malkin in my top 5 over the years. And in my mind, so I mean, I think he's a surefire Hall of Famer. I think he's a bona fide superstar in this league that I think doesn't get the recognition. And I think you look at top 2 centers that have played, I think it's a fair game to ask where Crosby and Malkin fit. I'm not saying they're Gretzky-Messier, but I think in terms of top 2 center combinations,
they're probably second.
You could make an argument of second, for sure.
I mean, who else would be in that conversation off the top of your head?
I can't think of one off the top of my head that certainly would fit. Yzerman Fedorov comes to mind, but I probably would have them.
I think the Penguins have done what they've done is longer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's fair.
It's obviously maybe in a season or two there you could go head to head with that, but I feel like the dominance for the longest stretch of time that the Penguins have had and the winning that they've been able to do. I know Detroit has seen similar success, but not all of that was done with Yzerman and Fedorov. So I think I don't know, because you're putting Crosby in that top 5 conversation all time players, and then for me I would probably have Malkin somewhere around the 50 range. Is that fair to say?
That's fair. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with
and
that.
I don't know where you would put Yzerman and Fedorov. Probably Yzerman somewhere around the top 20. And then Fedorov, I'm not sure. Maybe around Malkin somewhere, probably.
I think Fedorov is another guy that I do think was underrated, because that was a guy that played also a number of different positions, including defense in Detroit as well. People forget that was he was an immensely talented guy that I think is an underrated guy in terms of all time.
Oh no, I feel like he was probably the best Russian until Ovechkin and Malkin.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think he broke the mold of that for sure. But I mean, I'm trying to think of who was paired with Trottier, who was paired with Lemieux. But there really Lemieux Francis would be up there. That was a good,
Yeah. No, I would probably say second place, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
Yeah. We'll have to get some comments from the audience on that as well. But there's a guy on this team also, I think, in terms of, I'm not saying that this guy is a star,
Mhm.
but the Toronto Maple Leafs are I feel like I'm bashing the Leafs here.
You are.
But I'm going to continue.
But I am as well, so
Okay.
continue.
The guy that everyone is like, oh, but there's Mathews, and then there's Tavares, but then you have to look out for Nazem Kadri. Did someone forget, anyone remember a guy named Derek Brassard?
Oh.
Because I kind of, I don't know, I kind of have always looked, I actually think Kadri is one of the more overrated players in the league. If this guy was playing, you can at me, Leaf fans, I said it, Kadri is one of the most overrated players in this league. If this guy was playing on an East Coast or a West Coast American team, Kadri would not have the love that he has and he's playing in Toronto. There's I call it the Toronto notch. You play in Toronto and you're considered a little bit better than you actually are. And I feel like Kadri is one of those guys. He's fine as a third-line center, but to call this three-line center crew the best in the league and forgetting what is up the middle in Pittsburgh, which is their strength, I think is just completely... I feel it, quite honestly, this is where I go back to this underrated part, is it's almost an insult on what Crosby and Malkin have done. And I think that this off-season with this Tavares signing, I think there's a number of things that frustrate me about it, but the whole praise of Tavares is just, I feel, has been a slap in the face of Crosby and Malkin, in a sense.
I feel like people, the thing about the Penguins is I feel like people are too quick to just let go of them. Like, they're assuming that it's the end of the Penguins already. And they're just moving on to the next story, or they're wanting to do that. Because that's what it says to me. How could you just all of a sudden be like, Toronto's better, Toronto's the best, Toronto's the next team, when Pittsburgh's still sitting here with, like we just stated, top 5 player of all time. By the way, I fact-checked it. Malkin, 36 points in 08-09, most playoff points in one playoffs since 1993, Wayne Gretzky. 40 points. And that was in a different era as well. So, I mean, like, how could you even compare Mathews and Tavares to Crosby and Malkin? Can you win a playoff series first? How about that? Secondly, I mean, Derek Brassard has been one of, not a fantastic player, not like great, but at times he was leading the Rangers to a lot of success in the playoffs. And even in Ottawa had some success there. So Derek Brassard is a very good third-line center and will give you a lot more of an offensive game than Nazem Kadri will on the third line of Toronto. So, and I think with Brassard, it's going to be, I'm very excited to see what he brings to the team this year, because obviously it took him a little bit of time to get kind of into the Pittsburgh style of play, because it's very different as opposed to what he played in Ottawa. And obviously he got hurt, so that set him back. But I want to see what he can do this year in Pittsburgh, Derek Brassard. And yeah, just to compare those people, and then people just saying, oh, it's the best center duo in the league and it's not even close, without even thinking about like the rest of the league. Well, or even thinking about the rest. What about, are they even better than Washington's center duo?
I would say they're not, actually. Here's the one thing that I think people have completely forgot about Tavares. There's a number of things, but this head coach of John Tavares, current one, is the Olympic head coach and played Patrice Bergeron before he played John Tavares.
I would too, though.
Well, of course. Who would? Well, I mean, many would. But if you're...
Maybe not Leafs fans, I'm sorry.
Hashtag we hate the Leafs or something. But no, but
I'm not saying John Tavares isn't a good player. I like John Tavares. I'm always going to like John Tavares. His uncle is the greatest lax player of all time. Of course I'm going to like John Tavares. So, I mean, but he is the second best John Tavares. I'm just going to put that out there. But this is a guy that he's never had over 86 points. In the playoffs, he did have one awesome playoff run, which only lasted 2 rounds.
Yeah, 11 points in 11 games. He is
11 points in 11 games. He single-handedly basically won them that one series. But besides that, he hasn't really proven it. In the, as you brought up, in the Olympics, he did win the gold medal, but he only played 4 games, and then he got injured and played on the 4th line. In 2016, he had 4 points in 6 games, but again, for the World Championship, wasn't a big member of that team. He's never been a huge member of the World Championship or Olympic team. He's never really shown his ability to, play in the clutch moments outside of a couple of series in the playoffs. And now you're going to thrust this guy into superstardom in Toronto with all the media and all the constant pressure of playing in Toronto. It's going to be very interesting to watch. He's a very talented player. I like him a lot, but to compare him to Sidney freaking Crosby is pretty nuts.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we have gotten on years with Alex Ovechkin or not getting to creating over that hump. John Tavares has been in this league since 2009, 2010, and he's only been in 3 playoffs. And we can't use injuries as an excuse because he has 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons where he's played every single game. We don't question what the success of John Tavares is and what he's done. He has fallen under the radar, and we've used the argument, well, he's been playing with a bad organization. He's still a number 1 pick. He still was a guy that was considered a franchise player and a franchise, and obviously the Leaf fans are looking, and Leaf folks are looking at this guy as a franchise-altering move.
And maybe if he was in a different division and didn't have to face the Penguins and the Rangers and the Capitals every year, maybe he would have been better, but, they had some good teams.
They did. They have drafted pretty well.
During that 2012 to, 2015, 2016 range, they had some pretty good teams.
Yeah.
So, he could have made a run with one of those teams. But we'll see what he does in Toronto, Kev. I'm sitting back.
Yeah. The other thing with the Penguins, and it's one of the things that I think the Penguins have been focusing on in their off season, is there is some pretty solid wingers there. You've got your Hagelins, your Hornquist, your Kessels. But there's a feeling that you need more for some. So
there always is a feeling of that.
Are you one of those people, if you had a choice, Max Pacioretty or Jeff Skinner?
Ooh.
Who would you rather have, and what would you give up for them?
Oh, that's tough. I don't know if I'm gonna get in the business of what I'm gonna give up. It's that's tough. I don't know what they want. I don't know what positions they need. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I could say, but maybe if you throw a player out, I'll answer you. Who would I rather have? That's actually really difficult to answer. I think based off his age, you would probably have to go with Jeff Skinner. But at the same time, I feel like Pacioretty is a little bit better right now. So that's tough to say. I would take either. Can I say that?
Sure.
Okay. I'll take either one. I like both players, but they're different players.
One is more of a pure scorer than the other.
I think Skinner is more of a skater, good with the puck, good playmaker, has a nice shot. Max Pacioretty is a kind of a grinding scorer. He kind of just finds the spots on the ice. He's a pretty decent two-way player, obviously scores a lot of goals. And he's just he has great awareness for the game. So in one facet, I know that you're not a huge Max Pacioretty guy. I feel like if there is one guy that the Penguins could get that would be really, really good for Sidney Crosby, it would be Max Pacioretty.
I just don't. I see. To me, I know that there's been talk that the Oilers want to make a run at, and I look at that Oiler team, and if I'm the Oilers, they're for what I would think that they would want for Pacioretty, I wouldn't do it. I think
I would go with Jeff Skinner if I were the Oilers. You get a guy that can skate really well, put him beside McDavid, he can shoot, you know.
But I mean, if the Oilers are contacting me about Max Pacioretty, my instant answer is, my first thought is a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi, and I don't know if I would trade Jesse Puljujarvi yet. I think this guy has got a lot of talent and upside.
Yeah, I think he's a good player.
He is a really good player. And I just think if you're the Oilers, you gotta fix the back end there. It's not the need of a forward that you need. You need to fix that back end at some point in time, and not just with an Adam Larson and a Darnell Nurse,
which was a terrible trade, by the way.
It was an underrated.
We said it at the time.
Yeah.
Remember, we were in Van Arts.
Yes, when we were in school together, many did. Many questioned that, and Chiarelli got away with it a little bit because they made the playoffs. But I think this year, with Hall's success, you saw in an MVP season, it does look bad. But the Oilers need to improve their defense, and I don't if you're giving up on a Milan Lucic. Why are you bringing in what does Max Pacioretty bring that Milan Lucic doesn't? That would be the question.
Goals.
But you can
offense.
You can get that. You used to have a number of players that I think can bring that. To me,
I understand what you mean. It's not your first priority. I understand that. But to say that Max Pacioretty wouldn't improve your team is pretty crazy.
I think that the Habs are going to want a lot more than I would be willing to give up for him. That's my concern. This
is a guy who scored 39, 37, 30, and 35 goals in a row. And then, and 33 in a row. So, I mean, he's pretty good.
Yeah, but a guy like Skinner, I don't think you would have to give up as much. And I think you can.
I don't think so, because it's the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, that too. But, I mean, yeah, that's the thing that when I look at Pacioretty, yes, I think he's a 30-goal scorer. Do I think in certain situations I think he would be more of a fit? You're probably right. He may be more of a fit in a place like San Jose, Pittsburgh, San Jose, maybe even Anaheim. But
I'm a fan of getting Match Pacioretty because I know that the Penguins need to win. If they're going to win, they need to win the next 3 years.
Fair enough. I can see that, and that's where you have that value of Pacioretty.
Yeah, and that's why I'm all for Rutherford, because he tries to make moves now that he thinks can help the team win now. That's what I'm all about.
Win now.
No,
none of this long-term rebuild.
No, none of this garbage, Kevel. If you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, you need to win now. If you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, you need to do anything you can to win now, because those players are leaving pretty soon. Bob.
Yeah, exactly. Well, really, all NHL teams should be trying to win now.
Yeah, unless they have no talent. I mean, it's only so much you can do.
Yeah. I mean, even
the nucleus first. Once you get the nucleus, then you can go from there.
Yeah.
You know.
Where are you on Phil Kessel?
That's a tough question. This past season surprised me from Phil Kessel. I'll put it out there. I thought this was the year where Phil Kessel would sort of drop off. But he actually had his best regular season he's ever had for the Penguins. So then he went into the playoffs and started off pretty well. It seemed like he got injured, and then he stunk. He was absolutely horrific. Bad. So, it's tough to say. I think that Kessel has a 2 to 3 years left of really good play, and then he's not going to be very good. My questions with Phil Kessel is, how long can he keep up the fact that he plays hockey with a dad bod and still play at an elite level? When you're 30, he's 30 now. When you're 32 years old, are you still going to be able to score goals with a dad bod?
I don't know.
That's my question about Phil Kessel. I feel like getting rid of him before he falls, because I think when he falls, he's going to fall. So, I mean, he has such pure talent with his wrists and his ability to shoot the puck and pass the puck, but I don't know, man. I think that you got to keep him right now, though, because he's too valuable. I don't know the whole thing with the team, like with the coach, and I heard there was something going on with Sullivan behind the scenes, but I've never really seen that to be the case, so I can't really say that that's an issue. But I would also like to see him play a little bit more with Malkin, and I think that those two were disappointed they didn't play together enough. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with Kessel. I don't think he's going to get traded before the season or during the season, really. I think that's going to have to be like a next year decision, unless he's playing very poorly to the fact where he gets traded at the trade deadline, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think we're going to have to wait another year to see the whole Penguins-Kessel situation go down.
If the Canadians offered Kessel for Pacioretty, would you do it?
Oh, no, probably not.
I think that's fair. I wouldn't do it if I were the Pens either. And I wouldn't.
No.
I don't know if I would do it if I was the Canadians either. I don't know if that helps them.
Yeah, I don't know if it helps anything, really.
Yeah. Well, I could see Mark Bergevin asking for Kevin Stevens, just because.
Yeah, maybe.
Or Warren Young.
Well, Mark Recchi's on the bench. Maybe he'll want it.
Yeah, Mark Recchi's a possibility. He's out here sometimes in Kamloops. Tom Barrasso, another option. Some great Pen legends there. Who's someone that we don't pay enough attention on the forward ranks for the Penguins?
Ooh, I think the answer would have been Jake Gensel, but I feel like he gets enough attention now. Is that right to say?
I
feel like this year he's going to be a very good player because in the playoffs he was ridiculous.
Man, if I was in the Pacioretty Skinner Converse GM, and I'm not saying I am, but I would have to ask about if Jake Gensel can be part of that.
And no, he's not, but Jake Gensel needs to get paid pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Jake Gensel's a first liner, no doubt. Crosby, Gensel. That's the pairing. That's the combo. That was the go-to combo the whole playoffs. Carried the team through the playoffs this year until their stop. And then, of course, he was amazing last year, too, in the playoffs. I think Hornqvist is a guy that's been underrated his entire career. He is a really good player. I think he's sort of like a better version of Thomas Holmstrom that used to play for the Red Wings.
Yeah.
He is like the heart and soul unsung hero of the Penguins that I think doesn't get enough attention. His ability around the net, his grittiness, he plays a lot with Crosby, just his awareness around the net, and he's just that guy you want on your team, But if he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, you hate him.
Yeah.
That sort of guy. I think, though, probably the most underrated player forward on the team is probably Brian Rust. For his two-way game, his skating ability. He was hurt a lot this year, so obviously you didn't see a ton of him. But I think he's a solid player that doesn't really get a lot of attention. But I think Patrick Hornqvist is probably the more underrated guy across the league. But in terms of value, in terms of how he's valuable to the team, but in terms of just underrated hockey players, I think Brian Rust is underrated.
Fair. And what about the coach, Mike Sullivan? The guy is 1, 2.
Kev?
Yeah, here. Hello. Hello. Did we lose Mitch? There we are. Mitch?
Oh, I couldn't hear you for forever.
Oh, there we are. Okay. Nope, we're there now. We're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Mike Sullivan. Let's talk a little bit about him. What do you think of him? What are your thoughts? Where is he in terms of coaches?
I think you have to put him at the top of the list. Not necessarily, I don't know if he's number one or not, but I think he's in the conversation for one of the best coaches. Obviously, 2-time Stanley Cup champ. I just think he's the perfect coach for this team. He always finds a way to motivate this team. He always finds a way to put the right line combinations together. And what I really like about him is he always finds ways to adjust. He's a very good coach that, in terms of adjustments, game to game, period to period, shift to shift, he finds ways to adjust. He finds ways to just get something new out of the team. And it's very hard to go back to back, but just have the success that they've had so far with him as the coach. And he's always find these little wrinkles in the game, whether that's losing Letang and finding ways to play without him, whether that's changing the lines, putting Kessel with Bonino and Hagelin, or putting Kessel with Malkin, or finding line mates for Crosby, or just different things. I think he's been very, very good with that. And I think he's implemented a system that has been influential across the NHL with the speed, go get it type of style, the skill speed style of the way that the Penguins play over the past three or so years has opened up the game for all these players on their team. And then also you've seen it with other teams like the Lightning, the Leafs. These teams have sort of taken what the Penguins have done and tried to do it on their own. So I think he's a very influential coach, a very good coach, and he's the perfect one for the Penguins.
And, what's amazing is we forget in 2016, he came in almost halfway through the season to replace the coach and got the championship, which is unheard of, really. That's not something that happens. He was out of the head coaching realm for 10 years, being an assistant coach plying his trade, and getting back into there. So, he has worked quite hard to get into his craft. I think hard not to say he's not one of the top coaches in the NHL at this point in time. So overall, before we move on to other things, where are you putting the Pittsburgh Penguins in terms of the Eastern Conference contenders? Where would you have them?
I think I would have them in the conversation. I think the Lightning, depending on the thing with the Carlson guy, I think that's a big thing that has to happen for this to all kind of for us to see it. But I think Lightning are probably the favorite. I would probably stick Pittsburgh at number 2. Washington at the same level, probably 2 or 3. And then you would have, after that, I think it's kind of a toss-up, but I think a lot of people would put the Leafs, and I think that's fine, at number 4. So I think that's probably the top 4 teams in the East. But I think that the Penguins have as good of a shot as anybody in the East to go back to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, if Erik Karlsson ends up in Tampa Bay, I believe he will surpass John Tavares in terms of the guy that has to win the Cup, that has going to have the most pressure to be successful this year. I think right now that guy is John Tavares. I think certainly the Penguins, to me, feel like they're in the top 2 in their division. I think it's fair to say top 4. My top 4 does not include Toronto.
Interesting.
I still have Tampa, Boston, Washington, Pittsburgh, I think, as my top 4. I
think after that, Boston is there. And I would also stick Philadelphia. I think they're going to be good as well this year.
Yeah, they're certainly on their way up for sure. And I think that the 35 goals that Van Riemsdyk loses in Toronto, I think it will be a help. I'm always the thing about Philly is always the goaltending to me.
It's been forever.
Yeah, it's since Lindbergh and Hextall, they have not solved that problem, and Brian Elliott is not the answer there. And hopefully Carter Hart. I don't know if he's ready yet, but I think he's coming. But I think until then, that's what concerns me about the Flyers specifically. But I do think the Eastern Conference is still wide open in a lot of ways. I still think we got some interesting things to happen. So I don't think we submit our plans for Stanley Cup parades in the middle of July.
I think that's the thing about the NHL is it's like who's playing the best hockey at the right time.
Yeah. And
who's healthy. And that's what it comes down to, especially when these teams are so close that anything can really happen over a 7-game series. So, yeah, the Penguins, as long as they're there at the end of the day, they have a shot.
Yeah. Let's get into a couple of other things quickly here before we wrap up. Connor Hellebuyck signed a 6-year deal with the Winnipeg Jets. They were the Canada's darling team last year that almost went to the final. They got beat by the Golden Knights. They overcame the Preds. They did lose Paul Stastny to the Knights, but are you high on the Jets, or are you thinking that there could be dip back? What are you thinking about the Winnipeg Jets?
It's tough to say. I know they've lost a couple players in free agency, specifically down the middle. But I think they're still going to be a playoff team. I don't know if they're going to have the same run they did this past year, just because they might have that dip. But I still think that they have all the talent to make it back and surpass where they were. So I think they're still in that, like we just discussed, the Eastern conversation. I think they're in the top 4 of the West.
Yeah.
It's just at the end of the day, shaking that out. But they have a ton of talent. I really like Scheifele, Lane. That's a guy that needs to really step up. I want to see him do it in the playoffs. He kind of disappeared a little bit. Ehlers is very good. They have the defense. They have the style of play to get it done. And now they have the goalie. So I think they're in the conversation. I would maybe pick them to be a slight regressor, though, a regress candidate there, but not by much. I think they're still going to be in the same conversation at the end of the day.
Do you feel that Dallas and or St. Louis made steps towards them? St. Louis acquiring O'Reilly and Bozak. I think they gave up a lot.
I think St. Louis did. I don't know what Dallas is doing. Do you know what Dallas is doing?
No, I don't. I think Dallas is one of these overhyped teams that I think people are like, they look, I don't see the appeal with Dallas. I don't think they're as good as people think that they are.
I mean, is Roman Polak really going to put you over the top? And Blake Como?
No.
Solid pieces. Probably better than what they had before. Maybe.
They made, I think that they made one of the biggest errors of the offseason. I think they are going to look back on this year, and I think that we're going to have a conversation at some point of why they did not hire Alain Vigneault, because that, to me, would have been the perfect...
I don't understand why any team wouldn't want to hire Alain Vigneault.
I completely agree. I think that this guy is a great coach. I mean, he would have been a great fit in Dallas because he's handled superstars like the Sedins. He handles interesting players.
He had 2 runs with President teams.
Yeah.
President Trophy winning teams.
And
2 separate runs, entirely different rosters, entirely different personalities and players, and he did it, and 2 big markets.
Yeah. And he's been in the Cup final twice. He hasn't won, but he's been in the Cup final twice. So,
and I would argue he probably should have won with the Canucks, but not sure about the Rangers.
Yeah, fair enough. But
But yeah, definitely, like, just going through and looking at the Blues roster now, they, adding Perron, getting him back, then Maroon, O'Reilly, Bozak, they've definitely added a lot to the point where they used to be where they were super stacked in the forward group. This past couple of years, they've sort of lost those players, but whenever you have Tarasenko, O'Reilly, Shen, Bozak, Steen, Bouwmeester, Pietrangelo. This is a very talented team. They need to get the goaltending, though.
That's going to be the question.
They need to get the goaltending, but they have a very good team. And they have a lot of players that have experience. They have a lot of gritty type players, and I think that's good for the Western Conference.
And they have you mentioned this too, but a very strong defense. If they get J-Bo is healthy, they're going to be dangerous defensively. So I am interested in seeing where St. Louis is.
One thing I do question, they need to score more. Like, they need I don't know if they need another scorer, like pure scorer, but the big thing with them has been always too much reliance on Tarasenko over the past couple of years to score goals. And maybe O'Reilly will help there, but he's more of a two-way guy. And maybe Bozak will help, but we'll see.
Yeah, an interesting structure there. You know what team is a mess, Mitch? And I know
what team? The Calgary Flames? No,
they're not that much of a mess. Not as much as
not really.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the offseason about the mess that the Ottawa Senators are in, and they are a mess. There's been a lot of talk of conversation.
I think the Habs are in a mess.
The Habs are absolutely a mess, and I would argue they're actually a worse of a mess than the Senators. But you know what team that is falling under the radar mess is the Chicago Blackhawks. This is a team that did not make the playoffs last year. This is a team that was seriously questioning firing their coach, which they shouldn't have. It was the right decision. But they have got some anchors of salary cap issues that I don't know how you, if you're the Chicago Blackhawks, you get out of this mess. They've got some guys that I don't think are going to be easy people to trade. Seabrook, Keith, Jonathan. And I love Jonathan Toews, but how many teams are going to touch that contract? Their goaltending has been a mess.
Jonathan Toews makes $10.5 million.
Ugh.
And has he even, when's the last time he scored a goal?
It's been a while. It has been a while.
I mean, 52 points? 58 points? He had 52 points this year, 58 2 years in a row. For $10.5 million, I know he's a great two-way guy. He's supposed to be a great leader. $10.5 million. That's the same amount you're paying Patrick Kane.
Yeah. And they haven't been out of the first round since 2015. 1 goal in 11 playoff games the last 2 seasons. When he's on in the playoffs, it's great. But when he's on,
Brandon Saad, $6 million for 35 points.
That another underrated, terrible trade. Panarin for Saad was a brutal trade for the Chicago.
Oh, absolutely horrendous. But I mean, I don't remember. Were they forced to trade him, or what happened? Why did they do that?
Because they lost to the Nashville Predators in 4 games, and they felt that they needed to make some significant changes.
Why would you trade one of the young, up-and-coming, pure, talented offensive players for Brandon Saad?
I don't know. They must have felt that they needed some. They lost because of grit, but they lost because of a number of different things, including grit. And
but look at what they did this offseason. I understand you have this team that should be in win now mode because you have Taves and Kane and Keith and Seabrook, who are only getting older, by the way. But you signed Chris Kunitz, who's 38, almost 39 years old, who played on the 4th line of Tampa Bay. Who, I mean, does he still have the legs? And I love Chris Kunitz. But is he still going to give you that? I don't know. Marcus Kruger comes in. Sure, I guess. 4th line. You get Brandon Manning, who, a friend of mine, the huge Flyers fan, he despises Brandon Manning as a hockey player. So, I mean, you had some of the weirdest signings of this offseason, some of the worst trades recently. And you just, when the Blackhawks, when they were at their peak, it was like that thing where they had the star players, but they would also find this random guy out of nowhere that would just light the world on fire. And you look at their depth offensively, I bet a casual NHL fan could not name more than 5 of their forwards.
I would maybe suggest 2, really. I mean, other than Taves and Kane, who do you really have?
I mean, people would know Chris Kunitz, but I don't know if they've known on the team. Anisimov, most people know. And then Brandon Saad. But past that, I mean, Nick Schmaltz is their second-line center. You look at some of their guys on their 3rd, 4th line. There's no depth anymore on this team. And the defense, the same thing. Past Keith and Seabrook, and they're going to get all the blame too.
Yeah,
Keith and Seabrook. But look at the guys that they have behind them.
Yeah, other than Chalmerson, it's not pretty. I mean, you brought in Cam Ward to back up Corey Crawford, but that's a guy that hasn't. I mean, I guess it depends on your perspective. If Ward was in a bad system, I guess we'll see. But it certainly doesn't feel like he's a number 1 goalie anymore. There was a number of teams that could have had a shot at Cam Ward and didn't take it. Yeah. Jim Rutherford.
I mean, I don't know. Cam Ward's just there for insurance, so whatever.
Yeah. Right.
It's not going to make or break their team, to me.
Well, but Corey Crawford hasn't always been healthy, though. So
I guess
that is a team that would need a backup goalie. I look at this team, and other than the superstardom of on the surface, people get frightened of the Chicago Blackhawks, but really when you look at them, there is a mess, and they don't know. It is going to be tough to clean that up. Because I don't know if anyone's going to want to touch that $10.5 million.
I don't know if this is a bad comparison, but they kind of remind me of the Seahawks.
It's not a good comparison because the Seahawks, the one thing is the Seahawks let go of their guys maybe a year too late, but they did let go of their guys.
But the thing about the Seahawks is what they did is they paid everyone.
Yeah.
They didn't let anyone go, and that's exactly what the Blackhawks did.
In that sense, true, but yeah, it's the Seahawks. It's going to be. I guess it's interesting. I don't know. See the Seattle Seahawks in this win now mode. I think that there's a realistic there. I feel like in Chicago, there's still a sense.
They're still in that mode.
Yeah, they're still in win now. They think they can compete.
They're entering into the Canucks. We just want to make the playoffs to sell tickets mode.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess there. Is there anything else we need to talk about? We covered quite a bit in our hour-ish long conversation here.
I'm not sure. Any other NHL news going on right now?
I think
other than how great the Leafs are going to be and where their roots going to be that I'll be watching.
Yes, I mean you're going to be back in Toronto this year. I imagine.
Oh man! Why'd you remind me?
Imagining the Knights of Toronto, just those moments.
Hey, and I'll love it when I'm at the playoff games. I'll cheer for them and everything, unless they're playing the Penguins, that is. But I'm just gonna be along for the ride when they just failed. They just on their head.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It's a very interesting. It's so interesting, and not gonna dispute. Hey, good on you for signing Tavares, but I think
it's like they signed LeBron.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, could you imagine that? I mean, he was on his way to Toronto. I mean, now Kawhi Leonard's on his way.
He's gonna switch sports and play hockey.
Tavares to LeBron. But overall, it's a very interesting offseason. I think there'll be more coming up. We'll kind of track a little bit again. Just a reminder here. Unfortunately, we had to start this podcast with the bad news of Ray Emery passing away at the age of 35. We'll learn more as this goes on, so keep an eye out for that. Mitch, you got a lot of NFL content that you do as well, so why don't you tell everyone what's going on with the NFL in the Bottom Line View?
Yes, in case you guys have never heard from me before, you obviously realize that I'm an NFL fan by all my references. I can't help myself because I talk about the NFL every day. So go over on YouTube, The Bottom Line View. You also see Kevol over there, hopefully throughout the season, making some interesting picks. So go subscribe over there, The Bottom Line View. Also, you can follow me on Twitter as well at Mitch Milani.
Yes, I will be making some interesting predictions, I'm sure, on the Bottom Line View.
He will pick the Browns at least 4 to 5 times when he shouldn't. That's all I'll say.
Well, this year...
At least last year. Maybe not this year.
This year, maybe 2, 3 times. We are preparing for those picks. Yeah.
And yeah, of course, if you're an NFL fan, go over to The Bottom Line View. We have, just typical discussion type videos, rankings, top 10s, podcast format sort of videos as well. Q&As, fantasy football is coming. Yes. What else? Picks with Kevol, yes. Seahawks discussions with Kevol, so all that.
Yes, and you probably will get AC angry at some point in time.
Well, probably every week.
Yeah, every week I will make AC. How will I make AC mad? I will have some head scratching opinions about the LA Rams or something, but I'll be there as well. Of course, you can follow me, KVOLE. Go on the Bottom Line View. Follow the podcast Hockey, like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook for this exclusive NHL content. It was good to do this.
It was fun.
Yes. We will talk to everyone very soon. R.I.P. Ray Emery. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.